The following are a true and correct account of the histories, for not at the behest of any lord of the cyclum are these annals made, but solely for the aggrandizement of the hallowed halls of the great crimson library, and thus the eternal knowledge of all humanity. These are the chronicles and histories of the command of Tiramara. The Maritimes are a land found not more than 4 days' sail north of Boston, and are known to have a mostly agreeable climate or moderate temperatures. As so told by its name, it is a land greatly influenced by water. Frequent rains come from the sky, and great winds come from the sea. Both great twisting gales from the south, and strong currents from the north flow over this country. The lands are flat, with few great heights to break apart its surface, and so these winds blow unrestrained. This country is composed in main part of 2 land masses, New Brunswick and Alba Nua, which have a breadth in concert of 300 miles, and then several smaller islands in the Gulf to the north which flows out from the River of Lawrence into the Eastern Sea. The subjects of this kingdom are known, in most part, as the Blue-nosed, yet despite the fact that they stain their faces with woad and other paints, they do not actually mark their noses blue. Of the Blue-nosed, there are 4 peoples: the Maritimes, the Gaels, the Mi'kmaq, and the Acadians, each of whom speak their own tongue and give their country a different name. The Maritimes and Tiramara are the same realm, known as either to the Maritima or the Gael. There are also those resident who came originally from the rough and savage Neo-feudal to the north. The Mi'kmaq are not an Oriental folk. Unlike the other folk of the kingdom, there are other non-Oriental peoples of the same common stock who inhabit the neighbouring lands. It is likewise so for the Acadians, with their Catholic cousins in the country of Quebec, and of the Maritimes, who share a bond of brotherhood with the Southron, the Yankee, and all other Anglic peoples. Thus their language is of most ease to recite. Thence the Gaels are a singular people, for no language closer to their own than Anglic or Espanol is spoken in any other country, except perhaps the tongue of the Cymry of the land of fire, from which we hear but a scrap every century. The question, why these folk did not migrate west as other Orientals did, is one most vexing, and one to which there can be no answer. About the ages before the deluge, there is nothing to know, for the deluge was the death of knowledge. In the absence of truth, there are naught but tales. In many forms are the stories of the Maritimes told, elegies for the glorious dead carved upon stone, prayers and chronicles scratched upon parchment, and in forms spoken aloud, whispered legends of cult heroes, or the painful, days-long recitations, or the poetic cycles of the living water. These are not history. A fool is one who takes every tale of blazing black gold as truth. A greater fool is one who cannot see the ancient, antediluvian truth hidden within, especially within the spoken word, untainted by the blatant bias of sponsored chronicles. It is haste to Flanders fields, where the souls of the unknown fallen go. It is haste from the sacred land of Rome, where the Pope once ruled. And it is haste from whence pilgrims came, fleeing tyranny. In 100 legends told by 100 peoples, this great land of the Orient is mentioned, and just as many cities and empty fields where cities once stood bear the prefix No, as if they were named in honour of somewhere someplace else. The Gael, Acadian, and Maritime languages are all a much greater closeness to each other, and to the languages such as Spanish, than the art of Mi'kmaq. It can only be denied by those blind to the laws of empiricism that these peoples are part of a wider family of Orientals who migrated across the sea from a great eastern continent, one that was sacrificed to the waters by the arrogance of humanity. The Mi'kmaq are therefore the first known folk of the country, by this reason and by reason of their faith. The Gaels and the Maritimes are adherents of the cults of Christ, and though the Acadians do not in these days, they did likely worship the same Catholic faith as their Quebecois cousins do now. Worship of the Christ is a practice which came to these lands from over the oceans, from the Orient, and the Gael, the Maritime, and the Quebecois all have no memory of their people's conversion to this rite, because this was their ancient tradition practiced in the East. The Mi'kmaq, however, remember and celebrate their conversion to the Catholic creed at the hands of foreign missionaries. The faith of the Laneux, as they call themselves, is at the same time Catholic and apart from all other Catholic deviations, for its incorporations of pre-migration Occidental traditions in their rites of Mass and in their faith's governance by a self-appointed ecclesiastical Grand Council. It is certain that migration from the East came in waves, the first to settle being Francophonic Catholics, who spread elements of their faith to the Mi'kmaq, and also settled along the River of Lawrence. The Francophonics of the Maritimes were then displaced by a later wave of migrating Anglic and Gaelic tribes, and then forced away to the lands of the margins, as is recorded in the epics of Le Grand Derangement. In these lands, the Acadians were struck by a revelation of that which lurks beneath the water, revelation to a truth we Yankees attained before we blinded ourselves with inane historical fetishism. But when the Acadians gazed into the abyss and upon the visages of the deep ones, they saw idols to be worshipped as the nurturing living water, not the truth of their fathomless inhumanity. Regarding the faith of the Maritime and the Gael, who compose the greatest part of the country's clans, the great majority of these people are zealous adherents of the legend of remembrance. They worship and revere those glorious dead who were cut down in the throngs of battle. In poppy-strewn shrines are the greatest war heroes a village has produced, or martyrs who founded a lineage, remembered. Their Book of Martyrs teaches that an age is long past. Their ancestors fought the greatest war ever waged against the Eastern Huns and their three tyrants, the Kaisers Attila, Wilhelm, and Hitler. In the blood-stained battlefields of Flanders, Christ, their rare-born saviour, fought and was slain to the notice of no one. Hence they remember those who died in violence, for any of them could have been their Lord himself. This obsession is why my genealogies are so sparse, for all except those who met an unseemly end, for they are old genealogies I want to remember. Stories of the Orient ruled by cruel and brutal tyrants are echoed in Yankee legends of fleeing westwards at the behest of Providence to escape oppression. It is likely then that the East this time was a land accursed with war between brother tribes and nations, where the vanquished were expelled into the sea. Memories of this time have surely been corrupted into the remembrances war to end all wars. Given what stories recall or the distances which separated the continents, I cannot see how a war could have been waged between them. No great wealth can be found upon or beneath this country's land, for there are few cities of note, and few plains of great fertility. Those that are interspersed between stretches of the thickest and darkest woodland. The lesser orders live a life much like that lived anywhere upon this continent, and by any of their ancestors. Cereals and what other grains the soil can support are grown to be subsisted upon, or kept for woolen beasts to subsist upon. That which is not consumed is naturally given up by the people to their lords. It is not in the soil that this country's wealth is found, but in the dark seas beyond, which hold an immense bounty of cod and scallop and lobster, all of which are much esteemed by outsiders. Sparse mercy is given by the sea. It is said that for every man or woman who returns home with their hulls full of salted scale gold, another two lie still in the water's depths. So it is the greatest testament to the strength of heart of this country's people that they still voyage out upon those stormy sprays. This enthusiasm begets violence in jealous defence against any they believe to be poachers upon their waters, attacking even those upon innocent missions of survey. Lords and knights of the Colombian Confederacy take immense pride in the respect and docility their serfs show them. Their serfs also take pride in a great many things, but whomst their fealty is pledged to is not one of them, for that changes as quickly as a scrap of parchment can go from one hand to another. The lesser men and women of the Maritimes, conversely, take great pride in who they swear fealty to, their clan chief. For these people view the clan as a family they are tied to by chains of loyalty and affection and faith. All clans make the spurious claim of common descent from a single ancestor, and those clans pledged to the legend make their founder out to be a legendary martyr saint to whom kinship with would be the greatest honor. To be a member of a clan is not just to serve, but to be a part of a community. Even the most lowly subject wears the clan colours in the form of checkerboard clothes they call tartan, and some serfs even take the name of their clan lord in a gesture of respect, and not grievous insult, as a Lord of Georgia, or even the Old Dominion would undoubtedly say a peasant soiling their name. The clan is the centre of life in this country, as are the feuds and fights between them. But this land is not rich or populated enough to birth great hosts, and so war is waged in raids and livestock rustling. It is only with the consent of the greatest part of the clans, whose loyalty is naughty and fickle, that a king may ascend the maritime throne. Such is the weakness of this country's so-called high kings. We perhaps know less of the earliest days of the kingdom than we do of the first Oriental migrations, for though we do have writings about this time, they were written solely to glorify Clan Irving. Their house chronicle proclaims origins from before the deluge, regretfully not a claim unique to them, and that they were no less than the sovereign of these lands, all the way from the year 1880 of the Christ-worshipping calendar. And it is not just that their house maintained this rule for centuries through the cataclysm, but that one man, de Irving, was patriarch of the clan for an entire period of 300 years. The chronicles then tell of his succession by Casey Irving, who lived a more believable 290 years. No man can truly hold power over another. A king is a king because he has tricked other men into believing it is so. Kings justify their rule by means uncounted. They claim favour of the divine, they claim skill in wardcraft necessary to defend the realm, and they claim descent from those who have held power in the past. This is the easiest claim to make, for if such a history does not exist, one can be written. What is doubtless the real truth is that the Irvings were a dynasty which only emerged long beyond the deluge, whomst built a following around their ancestral hold at the mouth of the St. John River, and their chief Casey, a man who certainly did live, though not to that age, made the other clans of the country recognise him as Wy King. The first Irving kings were believers of a strange creed which preached that with terror-based alchemy, good health could be maintained indefinitely. The extraordinary lifespans of their first kings was intended to be proof of their petromancerial ability and thus fitness to rule. Wy King Casey was a man of quick wits, and though it is commonly said he ran the realm more like a predatory corporation of Yankee traders than a kingdom, the Irvings remained unquestioned. In the year 2226, Phoenix Irving inherited the Wy Kingship. Yet Phoenix Bumela, a local term for a fool or an oaf, inherited none of the wits of his father, and was altogether incapable of ruling anything. Even under the stewardship of Casey, the maritime country did often suffer from the incursions of wild Mloka Yankees of the deep forest, who sought to plunder and to offer blood to dark forces they did not understand. However, it was in the year of 2229 that the Omnistar, anchor of the eternal Bacons, Keziah Mahonic, united all the Yankee peoples and stamped out the dangerous Mloka witchcraft and declared himself Emperor of New England. Perhaps Phoenix should not be faulted, for even the greatest king of the Maritimes could have done nothing against the power of the Mahonics of these times. In the year of 2277, the Omnistar led a Yankee host north, which swept over all and easily overcame the Irving hold at St. John. Keziah slew the Aftwit personally in honourable single combat, though the man was such a coward he did not even attempt to fight. It was in this way that the lands of New Brunswick were brought beneath Mahonic guardianship, and the great authority of the Emperor meant that this was the only time in which the land was free from the privation of pillagers. The people did live in unmatched security, and many great beacons of light were built along the lengths of the coast to guard the denizens of this maritime land. from what lies in the sea. It is a tragedy to the poor, foolish blue-nosed most of all, that they had these bacons shattered, for the entire world sinks ever closer to a second deluge, so long as the lighthouses remain unlit. Though this is a lesser tragedy compared to what the Mayflower scum did to the greatest bacons, lit by the Mahonics themselves, for they believed them to be witchcraft, when in truth they were the only defense against it. The Irving dynasty still managed to survive despite the fall of their clan old, and Cecil, the true-born heir of Phoenix, took refuge with the clans of the peninsula of Nova Scotia, known to the resident Gaels as Alba Nua. Cecil roused the Blue-nosed clans to his banner, the strongest of whom were the Beatons of the island of Cape Breton. It was in the Christian year of 2281 that Cecil's host stopped the army of Keziah, who by this time had returned to his homeland, at the Battle of Muddy Dykes, referred to more poetically by the Blue-nosed as the Battle of the Shattered Mask, named so after the broken masks of Yankee war chiefs. At the conclusion of this battle, the routed Yankees were driven into what is called Fundy Bay, a place where the coast becomes a great basin where tides rise higher than any other known land. Thus, when high tide came, the Blue-noses did prevent the ailing Yankees from return to the land, and so had them slain in the worst way, drowning at the cold hands of the sea. Cecil's victory at the Muddy Dykes, and then successful reclamation of his clan seat, seemed to herald him as a man in the stead of his grandfather. Yet the restored Oi King instead followed in the legacy of his father, for Cecil was throughout his life afflicted with the most violent form of madness, which was not noticed in his earliest years. His one victory led to the delusion that he was beyond defeat to fester in the mad mind of Cecil, and he devoted the entirety of his 4-decade-long reign to attempts at taking revenge on the Mahonics, even though in the year of 2285, Liam the architect Mahonic, a man much more amenable than his father, became Emperor of New England. No less than 6 armies were raised at Cecil's demand to strike at the heart of New England, and no less than 6 were torn completely asunder by Yankee ambushes. Yet King Cecil the Mad would not relent in the face of any number of failures, and began to see the reluctance of his people to have their mutilated corpses impaled upon the branches of New England pines as a sign of their treason. The great suffering experienced by Cecil's men-at-arms in the long wars against the Yankees led to an explosion of adherence to the Legion of Remembrance, which offered dignity and respect for their sacrifice, which the Irvings and their self-gratifying alchemical cult did not. Several of the latter campaigns were led by young chief Wy Beaton, who was named Son of the People for his great compassion and was increasingly favourably compared to his mad sovereign. Yet Wiley was a man of unquestioned loyalty and honour, and was unwilling to ever take up arms against his rightful king. That was until the year of 2318, when Wiley at last became tired of the king's madness, under which he had lived his entire life. He slew Irving in a duel, and claimed the throne for himself, becoming the first Ardree High King of Clan Beaton, and the first Gael to rule this country. But all peoples had so suffered under Cecil that this was greatly welcomed. Ardree Wiley was an adherent of the Remembrancer Creed, and declared that it was by divine right granted by the unknown saviour that he had deposed the tyrant, for he could not claim the throne by right of ancestry, as the Irvings did. Ardree Wiley, son of the people, is rightly named the greatest king at Deramara, for under his long 59 years of rule, the realm was at peace, and friendship was made with all neighbouring peoples, though it was during his reign that the unity established by the Mahonic emperors of New England did begin to crumble, and the Maritime lands were once again menaced by wild Emlockers and Chowder folk, as they still are. Yet perhaps it was Wiley's just slaying of Cecil which did his nation more harm over the centuries than anything the Mad King ever wrought. For it was only the first Irving kings who held unquestioned right to rule. But beyond the time of Wiley, any avaricious clan knew that the throne could be theirs if only they could slander their lord as a tyrant, and thence much blood would then be shed between the brothers and sisters of this country. In the year 2377, Wiley fell asleep due to his great age at 82, but so great was the personal respect given to him that his son Findlech ascended the Maritime throne, while his daughter Normandy became Grand Commander of the entire Remembrance of Faith. Findlech was a man known for his claims of communion with the Fae, yet his madness was not as harmful as that of Cecil, and the base of Wiley was upheld for another 14 years, until the year at 2391, when the fairy Taka fell asleep. Wiley's third daughter Vimy claimed the throne, and the most ancestral Beaton lands in Alba Nua were given to her brother Beder, who was not yet at the age of majority, and it was from him that the primary line of the Beatons would then descend. Vimy was neither a cruel nor incapable High Queen, and instead a most capable administrator, and during her reign she attempted to improve and centralize the government of her realm, which remembrances call a command, to be closer to that of the neighbouring Catholic kingdoms of Quebec. It was during the rule of Queen Vimy that reconciliation was made with the Irvings, who by this time had converted to the Remembrancer creed. A marriage was made between her son Horace and Jacqueline Irving, a member of a lesser clan line. It was from their union that the new clan Beaton Irving sprung forth, who made their clan hold at the site of Durrow. Yet the fractious clans of the country chased absurdly under the obligations Ardban Vimy asked of them, and thus formulated a most unjust conspiracy. An alliance of traitor clans then did surprise the garrison at the Beaton Ord of Halifax, and take Vimy hostage upon the 24th of April, 2404, according to the conspirators' own self-glorifying eulogies. Vimy was slandered as an unjust and odious tyrant. She was given the name the Biased, for it was claimed she unfairly elevated her allies and kinsmen over all others. Thus, she was deprived of the throne, and the clans placed in her stead High King Ronnie Rafuse, a man chosen specifically for his unfitness to rule, as such a man could not challenge the power of the independent clans. The deposed High Queen is then claimed to have died naturally, less than a year after the start of her captivity. Ronnie was named the Cocky, for his estimation of his ability far exceeded reality. He had only been granted the throne because he served the unchecked ambitions of great clan chiefs. The rule of the Cocky lasted for but 4 years, until one of these conspirators, Ladislas of the Acadian clan Frogin-Quant, had attained enough power to depose and murder Ronnie and declare himself as High King. Ladislas ruled with competence for many years, and was cordial with the remembrant Grand Command. Yet he was during his life afflicted with gout, cancer, pneumonia, and typhus, the latter of which finally claimed his life in the year 2425. Ladislas, the King of Disease, was duly succeeded by Mathieu Frogin-Quant, Le Plocassin, who was blind yet revered as a man of exceptional piety, and is mentioned and eulogized in the Mevivant romances often. The saintly Matthew had neither spouse nor children, yet like his distant predecessor King Wiley, Le Plocassin was so respected that the clan swore fealty to his appointed successor Benoit, the beaver of the Mi'kmaq house Sillyboy. Benoit was a skilled steward of the land, and the command may have prospered under his guiding hand, but yet therein was the issue. The kingdom he so ruled was named the Command of the Maritimes, and he adhered to the Mi'kmaq Catholic rite. It was Wy Beaton who made the remembrant clergy an inseparable part of the state, and though the status of the faith was never challenged, many true believers began to despair that a permanent Dathan dynasty was being built. Thus, Primrose McDermott, chief of the reinvigorated Clon Irving, spread many false rumours and conspiracy theories that Benoit was not just a Catholic, but in fact a sacred devotee of the fathomless occultistry the hated enemies the Mahonics had subscribed to. Primrose offered no credible reason to believe this, but instead merely had it repeated so often that it became common knowledge, and thus the remembrant clans, who were in the majority, withdrew support from Benoit and allowed Primrose to slay him and become High Queen in the year of 2465. But the scheme of Queen Primrose ruled for but 7 short years, until the year 2472, when her brother Jim, who had long nursed jealousy that his sister ruled above him, though they had been born upon the very same day, murdered her to take the High Kingship for himself, earning him forever the shameful title of Twin Slayer. Now, it was during this time that all the Perdiansky nomads of the Albertan steppe were united under the singular rule of Edmund Dadas. The overthrow of the heathen Benoit had led to a great revival in adherence to the faith of remembrance, and the desire to convert other peoples to its ways. Chief Winchester Beaton had agreed to give up one of his kin for marriage to Daras, in return for the Hetman's conversion. Taras did not, ultimately, leave his faith in the ways of the Treos. Yet, by great personal affection, the marriage was still maintained, and as thanks for his new wife, Winchester was granted a personal honour guard of Cossack riders. Thus, Winchester Beaton became known as An Cossack. In the year 2481, Winchester did overthrow the Twin Slayer and order his Cossacks to disembowel him for his gravest crimes. Winchester then ruled for 12 years onwards, and under his reign the legend was again elevated to a place of high esteem. But the ascension of this brave and zealous king did not please the clans, for they feared that An Cossack would use his foreign army and loyal clerics to impose a despotism upon them. It was in the years before the year of 2493 that the people of Newfoundland, a harsh and uncivilized land to the north of the Maritimes, had become seen in the kingdom ever more frequently, as these fierce tribal warriors were employed as mercenaries by the clans in their wars against each other and their Yankee pillagers. These Nufi savages brought with them their spiritual traditions of the Fogsun Grove. Their faith was one of informal devotion to an array of fair divinities, such as the utterly horrifying and repulsive demons of the sea, known as Ollies and Lanky Men. Yet, this faith had become attractive to even the people of the Beaton Heartlands, as relief from the harsh orthodoxy of the Legend of Remembrance, and their veneration of ancestors was much akin to the Blue Nose Zero cults. It was in that year that an alliance of malcontents waged a war against the king, and their leader, the folk singer convert Eohen MacAskill, broke the neck of Winchester Beaton and had his Cossack guards slaughtered. Yet Eochen's power was weak, and rested upon the Nufi soldiers of fortune, who took the throne from him but one day after they had given it. Eochen tried to make his living from the sea as a fisherman, but lost his life to the sea. The Nufis indulged in a game of chance to decide from which among their number should become king, and it was High Chief Max Nagera of Avalon that was declared victor. Conquest and subjugation beneath the boots of foreign men was what the traitor clans had feared, and it was through their actions alone that it had come to pass. For a time of more than 5 years, Nagera would not let any duties to the realm distract him from his true vocation of lavish parties and obtuse games. It was a drunken game of knife juggling which finally ended his life in the year 2498, after which his son Craig was declared Wy king. Every other king of the Maritimes was the anointed patriarch or matriarch of one of the clans of the realm, and it was the greatness and strength of their own clan upon which the king's power rested. Ronnie the Cocky was chief of the weak refuses, and only rose to the kingship by the hands of others, and thus his crown was lost as quickly as it was gained. All of this is said to demonstrate the magnitude of the greatness of Craig Nagera's successes, for this hated foreign king, enthroned by rampaging Nufi occupiers, through his unparalleled personal virtue and skill in governance, obtained the unquestioned respect of all, and was accepted as a true high king. He was named the lawgiver for his just conduct, and is surely the greatest king this country has ever had, except for Wy Beaton. It was after 22 years of fair-handed rule that Craig the lawgiver died, not at the hands of another, which had indeed become a rarity in those times, but in the year of his death he was succeeded by his son, Frankie Nagera, who was universally considered to be a right idiot and was not unfairly named Fish Brains. King Craig had organised the reconciliation and peaceful settlement of the Nofis in the country. However, it was through this process that their savage warrior spirit was dulled, and they lost the strength to rule. Thus, in 1 month, Frankie Fishbrains was exiled peacefully to Avalon by united action of the entire court. It does seem yet that those who are not blessed in mind are blessed otherwise, for Frankie then lived to the age of 127. The clans then met and decided among them to swear fealty to Tetakwalani Basque, a Mi'kmaq remembered in equal measure for his short stature and great strength. Yet what is traditionally a desired quality in a lord did not end up so in his case, for in the year 2535 he gave his war marshal a backhand, and so did murder him without intent. The shame of this instance, especially in the eyes of the remembrant clergy, was so great that Tetakwalani resigned and disappeared from surviving mention. It was after the departure of Basque that the entire realm fell into a period of utter chaos and confusion, which can only be described as shitbat fucking arts. A conclave of the greatest clans was convened to decide the next king, and Orin of the lesser branch of the Beaton Irvings somehow managed to have himself named king there in February of 2535. Regardless of how this was accomplished, Orin, the delusional drunk bastard, immediately demonstrated his incapacity of ruling through his excessive drunkenness and mad delusions. Though neither a Beaton nor an Irving had sat the throne in over 50 years, they remained the two strongest clans of the realm and continued to nurse a distaste for each other from when Winchester Beaton had murdered Jim the Twinslayer. Thus, both clans despised the Beaton Irvings as a symbol of the failed and purposeless reconciliation attempted by the foolish High Queen Vimy. And so, both clans used the pretext of Orin's mental incapability to declare him unfit to rule less than 2 months after his ascension. It was Wiley II Beaton who managed first to obtain enough support to declare himself High King. However, Wiley II was as far as his namesake as could possibly be imagined, for he was also a great indulger in drink and was even less wise than his predecessor. He was considered an even more delusional drunk bastard than Orin. Thus, but a few months later, Cecil Irving declared that Wiley was also unfit to rule, and did slay him in a duel, to have himself proclaimed king. Orin and Wiley lacked any great ability of mind, and were mad drunkards both. But Cecil, the delusionalist drunk bastard, was that, and also an utter imbecile. He idiotically insulted the entirety of the Legion chaplaincy by declaring his reconversion to the faith of the first Irving kings, and declared that he would survive to rule this land for 10,000 years through life-giving petroalchemy. He and Orin Beaton Irving then did murder each other in a duel. The spiritual centre of the entire remembrance at Craig was the Legion Grand Command at Ottawa, whom had always had a fractious relationship with the heretic Ontarian kings, but they were always supported by the faithful of the Maritimes. It was when the Maritime Command was thrown into chaos by this crisis that the Ontarian kings in Yarrick consolidated their power over Ottawa and abolished the Grand Command, thus permanently shattering the orthodoxy of the Remembrant faith. This crisis had left all three participating clans in utter turmoil, and thus all the assembled clans selected Yosef Le Batard to be king, as he was the illegitimate son of Tetaqualani, with an Acadian of the Godin clan, because the relative stability of Tetaqualani's rule was missed after the utter ruin the drunkard chiefs of the greatest clans had brought the entire country to. And though Joseph was a man of few personal talents, relative stability is what he delivered until he too was taken by the sea in a shipwreck in the year of 2549. The young and amiable von Coenhoven was then elected to succeed him. Von was a man who held animosity with no others, yet he was thoroughly uninterested in the actual business of rule, and instead preferred to indulge in lavish parties and quantities of alcohol and hashish that were thought to kill any other. The clans pleasantly gave homage to their party animal king, then turned around to wage wars with each other. This state of affairs continued for 16 long years until 2565, when the king was killed in a drunken game of venomous snake tossing. A guru of far distant California would have said that the spirit of Max Nagera was reborn in Van. The Irvings then managed to obtain the throne for their scion Dunny, yet he was perceived as an utter simpleton and boomailer, and after 15 years of rule, several clans argued by precedent that someone so incapable could not be king, and so he was deposed without the shedding of blood. In the year of 2580, Tomais Mac Mi'kmaq, named so for his Mi'kmaq father, was named High King. Tomais was a learned student of scriptures and faith, and believed himself to have discovered the true way through a synthesis between the now mostly tolerated doctrine of the Fogson Grove and the Catholicism of the Mi'kmaq. 5 years into his reign, he sailed south to Boston to meet with and convert Hive Chief Aidan Mahonic, and there he was burnt alive at the advice of Crimson Praise scholars, a just sentence, not for any moral failing, but the utter cretinousness of his theology. Craisma, or the Christmas dynasty, or the Mi'kmaq of Chep Breton, then became king in the year of 2585 and reigned for 6 years, until his death due to a cancerous affliction. He was succeeded by his daughter, Marie Antoinette, against whom Sedonai of the Swift Sword Beaton raised the banner of rebellion in the name of restoring the position of the Remembrance of Faith, of which his clan had always been the greatest champion. For 1 year, Gael and Mi'kmaq clans thus waged war upon each other until Sedonai gained a military predominance over the greatest part of the country. However, The result of his seizure of the throne was that the Grand Council of the Lanu, whom had long existed peacefully under many high kings, then decided that they must have their own king to guard their liberties, and thus the Nuadri lost authority over lands which had been considered part of the Command of Tiramara for many centuries, including lands in ancestral Beaton country. Sidonai then ruled his reduced kingdom for less than 6 years until he was shot dead by an arrow, which sprang from a bow drawn by Darrell Irving himself, who did not even attempt to justify his assassination of the king and taking of his crown with anything beyond naked ambition. This blatant and unjust murder was not forgotten by Sidonai's brother, Basil, who nursed and cultivated his feelings of malice over 2 years until he was able to pay Darrell back in full and far beyond that. It was in the year of the coming of a new century, that of 2600, upon the 11th of November, which is revered as the Day of Remembrance, and the most sacred day of the entire remembrant year without equal, that the most infamous incident in the long histories of this land occurred. King Darrell and several members of his family were staying at the Beaton Ord of Halifax to take part in the customary ceremony of silence, which Basil Beaton claimed he desired to symbolise the reconciliation of their two clans. It was then, when the Irvings were in the midst of reflection upon the suffering of their reborn lord, and all those who faced war and violence from others, that Basil broke the silence and revealed the assembled party of legion chaplains to be his men-at-arms in disguise. The soldiers of Lord Beaton then did murder King Darrell and 12 other members of his family, including 2 of his nephews, who were at the ages of but 3 and 1, as well as all other clansmen and followers Irving had brought with him. In this way, Basil, who afterwards proclaimed himself the rightful king, utterly trampled upon the taboo of arming invited guests, and the even greater taboo of defiling the most holy day of remembrance with murder in cold blood. Darrell, of course, did not believe in the vengeful Basil's desire for reconciliation, but he accepted the man who would forever thereafter be spoken of as the Irving Slayer's invitation, because he never even conceived that anyone could murder an invited guest on no less a day as the Day of Remembrance. The direct family of the king, as well as the Irvings who ruled New Brunswick, as well as most of the Irvings of Petitcodiac, had been murdered upon that one fateful day, but Quivox Irving had not been at the service, and immediately fled into hiding when the news reached him, before the king's men did. Ardri Basil the Irving Slayer Beaton thus devoted the entirety of his following 11 years of rule to the single-minded effort of hunting down and murdering the last heir of his clan's eternal enemies. It was on the 9th of April of 2611 that all things finally came to a head, when Basil and a group of his men confronted Quivox, who was accompanied by a single masked companion. This companion was in fact Donny Irving, a man who had been belittled and dismissed the entirety of his life for his apparent lack of wits. Even the Irving Slayer thought so lowly of him that he did not care to eliminate this man who had once been king. Well, it was upon this day that Donny Irving proved to all that he was not a bowmailer, and instead deserved to have his name be written alongside the words "The Ablaze" for time evermore. Donny drew his sword and slew over 20 of the king's best horsemen, before decapitating the Irving Slayer and ordering his head to be displayed upon a pike at the gates of the Order of St. John, all in the name of protecting his nephew. Upon hearing this, the clansmen of the decapitated king declared his daughter Catelyn, of 6 years, to be Ard Banri, and his regents began preparing to finish Basil's work to exterminate the hated Irvings once and for all. But the young queen did overrule them, and took personal rule for herself at such an incredible age in order to make peace with the Irvings, and she allowed them to keep their ancestral lands along the St. John. Between Clan Beaton and Irving, there still remained immense hatred and enmity, not least because of all the warring and murders that had taken place between them, but also because many traditional Irving lands in New Brunswick remained apart from them. Clan lands are considered inseparable parts of the clan and are never taken in traditional wars and feuding, but Basil's desire was the complete extermination of Clan Irving, and so their lands were granted to ambitious maritime lords who were willing to profit off the situation, lords which the new Queen Catelyn also had to appease. Yet, despite these great issues and her extreme youth, Banri Catelyn proved herself extremely astute in the arts of diplomacy, and for over 5 decades, up to this current time, has secured a peace and tranquility in the command of Tiramara, unseen in several centuries. Thus, even while she still yet lives, some declare her to be the greatest leader of the country's entire history, and all know her as Auntie Ciorda, the Eternal.